You have to pardon my nervousness. This is my first talk in this sort of setting, so appreciate it. Yeah, thanks. Just quick, how many of you are investors, just so I can see? Okay, cool. And then how many of y'all are founders? Awesome. And then how many of you are ecosystem folks? Sweet. Yeah. I believe that's great. My name's Chacho with Backstage Capital, and we are a seed stage investment fund which invests exclusively in underrepresented, or as we like to call them, underestimated founders. So these are folks that are women, people of color, and LGBT founders. So back in 2015, our founder and managing director, Arlen Hamilton, started the fund. And if you haven't heard of her, she actually has a really cool story. She used to sleep at the San Francisco airport and was homeless for some time while raising this fund, and would go into the valley to try to raise it. But as she was raising the fund, she would hear a lot of things like, well, there's a pipeline issue. There aren't enough women starting venture scale companies. There aren't enough people of color starting venture scale companies. And she set out to disprove that with setting a goal of investing in 100 companies by 2020. And we actually beat that goal by a year and a half and invested in our 100th company last year in 2018, all led by underrepresented founders. Thanks. So, here we are at South by Southwest last year. This is about half our portfolio. Anyone in purple is part of our team. So how did I get involved? Going back in time a little bit, back to late 2016, I had spent several years trying to get a job in Metro Detroit. I was living with my parents in Wisconsin and dating my then girlfriend, now wife, long distance. And I decided to just try to get any sort of job in the Metro Detroit area, but one that I could still build my skill set and communication and sales ability. So I applied to Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint. AT&T and Verizon were like, no, thank you. Sprint's like, you speak Spanish? Yeah, let's do this. So I moved to Metro Detroit at Auburn Hills and started working at Sprint. And I knew I wanted to get into investing. I was in school full time at Baker College Online, nothing fancy, and just trying to make my way. And my plan was to get the sales experience, finish my bachelor's degree, get a job selling medical devices so I can become an accredited investor, and then start angel investing. And I was talking to my friend about this plan, and he was like, that's going to take 8 to 10 years. And I'm like, yeah, but that's what I want to do. I want to invest. And he's like, why don't you just go for it? Go try to get a job in venture capital. And at the time, I was really intimidated by venture capital because every podcast I listened to or blog post I read, the associates or partners would talk about how they went to Harvard or they went to Stanford or Columbia, or they started studying college mathematics in 6th grade. I'm like, I'm just this son of an immigrant that grew up in rural Wisconsin. And so I felt really intimidated, but I just decided to go for it. And I had already been interacting with folks on Twitter because I knew that VCs and people in tech spend a lot of time on Twitter. And you could hit up just anyone on Twitter, or you could hit up Chris Sacca or Sarah Tavel or Brad Feld, and they just might see your tweet and they might respond or like it or something. And that's how I ran across Arlen Hamilton. So I found her and I sent her a DM. I'm like, hey, Arlen, I'm an aspiring VC. I'm just eager to learn, what books do you recommend for me? She's like, I recommend Venture Deals by Brad Feld. And so I bought the book, and at the same time, I was listening to Backstage's newly launched podcast. And they're like, if you write us a review, we will send you a free t-shirt. Like, sweet, I'll get a free t-shirt that says Backstage. So I took a picture of myself, or my wife did, of me in the book and the t-shirt, and tweeted it out to Arlen, and she ended up tagging Brad Feld, and it was a really cool thing. He responded and whatnot. And from there, a few months later said that I wanted to start a blog or podcast, and Arlen sent me a DM and said, hey, let's talk, which I soon learned that it was actually an interview. And she said, she said, you know, I'm looking for an executive assistant. Do you want to work for me part-time? And I was like, well, I'm in school full-time. I am also working full-time, and I'm newly married. So yeah, for sure, I'll definitely do it. So I started working with them on some projects on the side. Being an EA for someone while having all these other responsibilities didn't work out as well, so my role quickly transitioned to helping them build out the start of their platform that helps support a portfolio. And then it was end of June, or July, excuse me, and I was really, really tired of Sprint. If you have worked in retail, it can be really hard, especially with angry customers, and you can't really solve problems for them. So, as much as you would like, at least. And I texted my wife and I said, I want to quit my job. And she's like, just do it. And at the same time, my wife was also quitting her job because of some health problems. So we're both here, decided to quit our jobs, and with like little to no savings, but I just knew that I could at least dedicate about a month to Backstage, and if that didn't work out, I could always go get another sales job. So I texted Arlen the next day after I put in my 2 weeks, and I said, hey, I quit Sprint, I'm done in 2 weeks, I want to dedicate my full time to Backstage. And she replied and said, wow, that's really serendipitous because we wanted to bring you on full time, but since it's so risky, we didn't want to tell you to leave a job with health benefits and whatnot. And I was off to the races from there. So this is me at our 2-year anniversary, August 2017, at Airbnb headquarters. So here, and this is our team, some folks that have come and gone as well. But what we at Backstage are trying to do is really disrupt venture capital. Obviously, we with our investment thesis, we also have other strategies to do this. We have, whenever we're actively investing, we have an open application process. So you don't have to know anyone at Backstage to apply for funding, because that really eliminates a lot of people when venture capitalists are like, well, get to me with a warm introduction. And some VCs go as far as to say, if you can't get a warm introduction, you're not a good founder, which we think is a load of BS. So we also, while typical VCs might see founders who are either married or women who have children or are pregnant as red flags, we see those as strengths. And then we're also really approachable. As you know, a lot of us are active on Twitter, and we also know that we can't invest in everyone. We only invest in about 1% of the companies we see. So one of our values is success for all, and so we spend some resources to try to activate the 99% of folks that we can invest in. So things we do are like our podcast, educational blog posts, and even have office hours. So this is what happens when you do things that are disruptive. This little like pink is the industry average when it comes to people of color and these demographics, and the light purple is Backstage's demographic for the first 100 companies that we invested in. Thanks. But our diversity goes just beyond the founder demographic. We're industry agnostic, so we invest anywhere from AI to gaming to SaaS companies. But we also invest all across the country. We don't just invest in the Valley in New York and Boston or Austin. We have companies that span the country and even here in the Midwest, which I love because the Midwest is near and dear to my heart. So we have companies in Detroit, Chicago, Minneapolis, and in Indiana. One of which is actually Curl Mix, which is recently on Shark Tank. And we really believe in like activating the ecosystems outside of the Valley and the areas that most investors spend their time. So going back to 2018, we're at South by Southwest. We knew we were going to hit this goal of investing in 100 companies early, so we're like, what do we do next? And we had this pull from the market to potentially start an accelerator, but up until that point, we didn't feel like we could do it and excel and do things like with excellence, because that's what we like to do. We like to be one of the best at anything we do. And so we decided to launch this accelerator, and we picked 3 cities, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and London. The 4th city was actually up to a crowd vote. And cool story, Detroit actually won the popular vote. Thanks to anyone in here that might have voted for Detroit. But it was already among the list of amazing cities we were thinking about going to. And a few of the reasons is because of the diverse population in Detroit, but also a rich history of innovation in both in terms of manufacturing, but also it's the birthplace of Motown. And the city has really invested in economic growth through its startups and technologies. And one example of that is the mayor of Detroit was at our Backstage launch event. So they're really supporting the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem. And here's the Detroit cohort. We have companies, or first I'll start with the team. They're led by Monica Wheat, which a lot of you know. She's a total badass. And also helping her is Tops and Amanda and Olivia. Olivia's formerly at Duo. I don't know if Tops was as well, but we recruited companies through our application process. As I mentioned, it's an open application process. We had over 1,800 applications for 24 spots. And so we narrowed those down to 24 companies, and the Detroit companies range from consumer companies selling children's toys to a lifestyle brand selling eco-friendly toilet paper to a SaaS company helping people eat healthier. So, what can you do to get involved? We would love to talk to you if you have, if you're interested in partnering with Backstage. We're always looking for partners. Also, if you're an investor, we would love to chat about potentially co-investing. We have an investor day on June 18th, and if you want an invite, you can feel free to email me, chacho@backstagecapital.com, or you could reach out on Twitter. And if you're a founder, I would love to talk to you as well, give you some feedback. But thanks for taking the time and for bearing with me through my first presentation. I appreciate you letting me talk about our story, my story, and how we're disrupting venture capital.